On
Bueno-
LinkedIn as well.
Buenos días a todos, un gusto compartir de nuevo con ustedes este espacio. Bienvenidos a otra serie, otra parte de nuestra serie LATAM-Africa Business Hub. Buenas tardes, también estamos hablando con Danilo hoy, él nos acompaña desde Kenia, exactamente desde la ciudad de Nairobi, y, y él nos va a... mm, y él nos va a hablar sobre cuáles son los retos en cuanto a transporte y estrategias también para el cumplimiento de aduana. Es un tema completamente pertinente cuando nosotros buscamos abrir nuevas oportunidades de negocio. Now I'm going to switch back to English. So good morning, everyone here in the Latin American region. Good afternoon in the Africa, Europe. Good night if you are taking from us from any part of the Asia, maybe India. So good morning to everyone. Well, I'm based in Bogota, Colombia. I'm delighted. Welcome back to the Latin Africa Business Hub, and let's start. I'm delighted to welcome to you on our monthly webinar series, held every last Thursday of the month, where we connect with leading experts to explore the vast opportunities across the African markets. Today marks another exciting chapter in our journey, and we dive deep into one of the most critical aspects of cross-continental business. And I'm absolutely thrilled to introduce our distinguished guest, Danilo. Danilo is a customs attorney and a highly experienced professional with over 20 years of expertise in trade facilitation, customs modernization, and regional integration. He has worked up with major multilateral organizations, including the World Bank, the Africa Development Bank, and the European Commission. Danilo has authored numerous publications on international trade and customs regulation, and has played a key role in developing and implementation of trade policy reforms and modernizing customs procedures across Africa, Asia, and Europe. He is the CEO of Desiderio Consultants Limited, a Kenyan firm providing technical assistance to governments and regional economic communities in Africa on customs and trade-related issues. Danilo is also a senior associate to the Horn Economic and Social Policy Institute, a regional think tank headquartered in Addis Ababa, Ethiopia. He holds a Juris Doctorate and he pursued postgraduate studies in international trade, finance, and industrialization policies. Our focus today is unlocking African business markets, customs, and transport strategies, a topic that's fundamental for any Latin American entrepreneur, business leader, or investor looking to expand into the African markets, and equally valuable for African companies exploring Latin American opportunities. Danilo, it's wonderful to have you with us today. We're excited to learn from your extensive expertise and help our audience unlock the tremendous potential that this market offers. So, good afternoon, Danilo. It's a pleasure to have you here.
Good afternoon, Sebastian, and thanks for having me.
Well, Danilo, it's a pleasure. It's what time is in Nairobi? How it's the things going in
Uh,
Nairobi?
Here is 4 minutes past 4 p.m.
Okay, okay. Let's Danilo. Let's start with our conversation. I have some couple of questions that I want to ask. So, mm, well. I will start with. Um, Let me see. Well, can you introduce a little bit of what are like the main issues of what is happening in Africa right now, like an a bit of the introduction in order like to get in deep with the different issues on customs and transport strategies that we're going to talk about?
Yeah, so mm, let me start saying that the present trading with Africa is not so simple because of a lot of challenges, both from a hard infrastructure point of view and a soft infrastructure point of view. From the hard infrastructure side, one of the main challenges is the infrastructure, transport infrastructure, which is inadequate. And this is referred not only to roads, but also to energy and digital connectivity. In terms of roads, there is a huge gap in transport routes in Africa, and transport costs are exceptionally high compared to other regions. I can show in a slide a comparison between the transport costs between Africa and Latin America. So if you look on the slide on the left, you will see a list of the African countries that have the highest transportation cost. If you notice, most of these countries that have the highest cost are insular states or landlocked states. On the right side, there is a comparison with the Latin American transport. You will see there are not a big difference because also Latin America compared to other regions has quite high transportation costs, but in the case of Africa are much higher. So this is due to a number of reasons. One, as I mentioned, is the gap in road connectivity, but also railway transport, because there are few railways, and mostly they are the result of projects that were launched during the colonial period. So these railways, like the roads, were built thinking to extracting materials from the inland destination in Africa to the seaports for exports, for being exported to the Europe mainly. So because of this situation, there are very few links between African countries. So this is valid for the railway, but also for the roads. So many roads connecting seaports to interior, and many railways that follow the same path, but very few connection between African countries. And maybe the only exception in terms of roads is the Abidjan-Lagos corridor, which is a road that connects transversally 5 West African countries. So another problem which is impacting on the high transportation cost is that the transport market in Africa is very polarized. We have a small number of large transport companies that often are daughters of multinational companies, and a wide number of small and sometimes informal transport companies, the small one, usually to remain competitive with respect to the larger company, they practice overloading on the corridor because overloading allows them to transport more goods. So in this way, they manage to improve their profitability. But this comes obviously with a cost, which is the premature damage to the road networks in Africa. And so you see, on one side, this practice allows them to remain competitive, but causes an accelerated road degradation. Another aspect that I would like to mention is the unbalanced nature of the African trade flows. Africa imports a lot from abroad, but there are few exports. So there are many trucks, many containers that come at the African ports directed to internal destinations, but flows in the opposite direction from the interior to the seaport are much less. Cargo from a port done, and most of the time it happens that they charge the cost of the return trip, which is an empty trip, to the same importer. So this can also happen in the opposite case when it's a landlocked country transporter that carry out this kind of transportation. So it is important to mention this aspect because one of the way to reduce this the impact of this additional cost is to use these e-logistic solutions that are booming in Africa. There are many platforms, many apps that are being developed to balance the trade flows. So basically, these are like Uber-style application where you describe the nature of your cargo and where is located, where the truck must come to pick up this cargo. And this app helps to find the transporter which is closer to the cargo and also to optimize the trip by finding a return trip. So these are the main issues.
Okay, well, that's interesting to review and to take note of how the transport issues are taken so far in Africa and the comparison that you made with the Latin American perspective, no? Taking in mind that we have, and we can review that there are some, that the situation is quite not that different, and they have similarities that we can review. And we can learn from these similarities in order like to develop our own markets. So I will go with the following question. Let's talk about how do tariff and non-tariff barriers differ across different. No, I will make this in the second. What characteristics current trade relationships between Latin America and Africa? How we were talking about first the transport. How other characteristics do you find between both regions?
Okay, as you mentioned, the fact, let me make just a quick reference to the cost of tariff in Africa. So if you look at this slide, the average tariff the duty rates in Africa is 12.3%, the orange line which is in the middle, while in Latin America the average is 6.8%. You see the blue line that is cutting this graph. So the tariffs are particularly high in Africa compared to Latin America, and there are several regions where these tariffs are particularly high. In particular, the North Africa, where especially Algeria and Tunisia. They have an average tariff rates of 19%. Morocco is the one that has a lower tariff. These are average tariff, obviously. Morocco, in the case of Morocco, is 14%, while if we go in the southern part of Africa, you will see that the southern Africa is among the lowest tariff in the continent. Also, ECOWAS in West Africa is a regional bloc that has is a custom union, like the EAC, the East African Community, is also a custom union, but ECOWAS has an average tariff rate of 12%, while EAC has a 13% average. So coming to the characteristics of trade. So let me skip this one because I was expecting you were asking me another question before.
Okay, no, don't worry.
Okay. So here there is if you look at this slide, you can see that most of trade from Africa to Latin America is concentrated in a few countries. And these countries are Nigeria, where there is a traditional export of petrol oil and other energy products, especially to Brazil. There is Morocco, which has a lot of export of food products to Latin America. Algeria, also energy products. Egypt is interesting because Egypt is the only African country that has concluded a free trade agreement with a regional bloc in Latin America, specifically with Mercosur, which includes Brazil, Argentina, Uruguay, and Paraguay. With also Bolivia that in the accession space, but it doesn't participate to this free trade agreement. So this is an agreement that plans a liberalization of tariff rates in a period of 10 years. Its implementation started in September 2017, and the liberalization period will end in September 2026. So next year will mean this means that all products, all the tariff lines covered by this agreement will be brought to zero. At the moment, there are some tariff reduction or tariff exoneration covering only some of these goods. So apart from Egypt, there is also SACU. SACU is a custom union that to which 5 African countries in Southern Africa participate: South Africa, Lesotho, Swaziland, Eswatini called now, Namibia, and Botswana. So this is exactly a preferential trade agreement, not a free trade agreement, because there are some products, some tariff line, they benefit from a full exoneration, 100% from custom duties on imports in the respective regions, while other products, they benefit from a tariff reduction. So tariff reduction, they are very different. They range from 10% to, as I said, 100%. So if you look at this other slide, you will see that the main exporter to Latin America is Nigeria, which has quite important trade volume, with, especially with Brazil. You see the amount of the trade of the goods exported in 2024 is more than $12 million. Obviously, these figures they may look lower. Actually, they are low because Africa and Latin America, they don't trade too much with each other, but trade is slowly expanding. In terms of products, you see here in this slide that most of African countries, even in this case, the exports are very concentrated on a few products, mainly mineral products and petroleum. There are also cocoa and cocoa preparations with Ghana and Cote d'Ivoire being among the main exporters to Latin America. If we look at the opposite side, so the country from Latin America that export more to Africa, you will see in this slide, look at the yellow bar, that one is Brazil. Brazil is the main exporter in Africa, and it exports mainly meat products, agricultural products, and some chemical products. So Brazil is followed by Argentina, and after there is Mexico and all the countries you can see in this slide. But the large share of trade between Latin America and Africa is between Brazil and especially Southern African countries, because Brazil trades a lot with these countries, as well with Egypt, as I said, because of this free trade agreement that was concluded and entered into force in 2017. So in terms of the countries, here in this slide, you can see the sequence of the countries in the order: Brazil, Argentina, Mexico, Guyana, Chile, Colombia, Peru, Uruguay, and Ecuador. These are the main Latin American countries currently exporting to Africa. And in terms of products, the main exported products are sugar and sugar confectionery, cereals, meat, and edible meat offal, and all the commodities you see listed in this slide. These data are extracted from the International Trade Center database. So in terms of regional economic communities, the regions that trade more with Latin America are the Northern African countries. Here, where you read Maghreb aggregation, this group it collects 5 countries in North Africa: Morocco, Egypt, Libya, Algeria, and Tunisia. Okay, these are the main exporter and importer of products to and from Latin America. In terms of exports of ECOWAS to Latin America, also, you can see that the volume is quite significant, $3.5 million of dollars in 2024, followed by SADC, which is a community of 16 African countries in the southern part of the continent, southern and eastern part, actually. After there is the ECAS, which is a free trade area in the central, among Central African countries, made up of 10 countries. Before they were 11, but recently, last month, Rwanda receded from this regional economic community. After there is COMESA, and the last one is EAC, which has a very small trade with Latin America, very small export because of the geographic constraint, because of being located on the eastern coast, obviously, there is not a direct transcontinental connections between the ports in Eastern Africa and ports in Latin America. So main countries that they trade with Latin America and those on the Atlantic coast, okay, the western side. In terms of export of Latin America and the Caribbean, because you know in international statistics usually Latin America is aggregated with the Caribbean, and in terms of export you see is mirroring exactly the export of Africa to Latin America. In this sequence is exactly the same. Northern African countries are the one exporting more. Importing more, sorry, from Latin America, followed by ECOWAS, SADC, ECAS, COMESA, and the last one, EAC. Let me stop here. I can come back on this slide, but if you want to ask me something more specific.
No, thanks for the information. It's very quite important how markets such Nigeria, from part of Nigeria, Egypt, have been like the most important markets that are exporting to Latin America. And how from Latin America, how Brazil, Argentina, and Mexico are the main players that are gaining the momentum that Africa have right now. But even though like we need to take in mind there are more trade opportunities, this is like only like a brief mirror or how it's going so far our trade relationships. So taking in mind that and the other thing is I want to take back to the tariff. It was our second question. Tariff, you say that normally it's about an average of 12.3 and make the difference with Latin America that is 6.8. So in order to finish this idea, we can see tariff and non-tariff barriers, how it differs, how it crosses around the regions. In order like to finish with the non-trade barriers, and if you have anything else to input about tariff.
Yeah, no, actually, this is a very good point because yes, the impact of tariff, as I said, is higher than in Latin America because they are particularly high. In Africa, currently there are only 9 countries that are not members of the WTO, so they use a tariff that are considerably higher with respect to the average. I can mention, for instance, Sudan as a tariff rate. You will not see Sudan in this graph because in this graphic is extracted from a publication from the WTO called the tariff profile, and this is the version 2024. So Sudan, you know, probably you are aware that they entered into a conflict 2 years ago, and there are no statistics available for the last years. But the last calculation made by WTO is that the average tariff was more than 21%. However, tariffs are just a minor problem because what is really a big impediment to African trade are non-tariff barriers. As you said, non-tariff barriers are, let's just to give a quick overview for people that are participating. So non-tariff barriers are generally all those procedures, complex and lengthy procedures that create problems in clearance of goods or delays in clearance of goods. They may consist in cumbersome custom documentation, in particularly bureaucratic administrative procedures, and or immigration processes, or particularly restrictive rules, or an overuse or abuse of technical barriers to trade, or sanitary and phytosanitary measures. So in Africa, the impact of these NTBs is very, very high. There are many studies, many of them conducted by UNCTAD, that show that Africa is the region in the world with the highest tariff, non-tariff barriers, and with the highest ad valorem equivalent of non-tariff barrier. The ad valorem equivalent of NTBs is the major price that the importer pays because of the existence of these non-tariff barriers. So at the moment in Africa, the type of non-tariff barrier is slightly different from region and region. So we can see that generally at the continental level, the most frequent non-tariff barriers are related to the excessive bureaucracy at borders and to the corruption of border agencies. These are pervasive issues that are present in all African regions and all African countries, which lead to long delays and official payments and unpredictable enforcement of regulation. Now, in the continent, there are, in each region, there are some platforms that have been developed that allow private operators to report the type of barriers they incur during their trade operation. So we have different platforms. For instance, in East and Southern Africa, there is a platform called tradebarriers.org, which is covering COMESA, East African Community, and SADC, so all the countries from Southern Africa to the Eastern Africa up to the Horn of Africa. And this is a combined platform used by 3 RECs. RECs stands for Regional Economic Communities. And in this platform, you can consult, you can check the different type of barriers that have been reported by traders. Now, I took a look before having this discussion to see what are the most prominent barriers in these 3 regions. And I found that the main one are related to, number one, cumbersome custom documentation and administrative procedures, complex immigration processes, and problems related to quality inspection and transit procedures. There are also many instances of arbitrary application of sanitary and phytosanitary standards. Like, for instance, I can give you an example, measures, restricting measures affecting the export of fish and agricultural products from countries in East Africa like Kenya. Also, there are other issues related to regional or national standards within this region that are not fully aligned with internationally recognized standards, like the ISO, the Codex Alimentarius, the one for the agricultural products. And this sometimes obliges extra-African exporters to undergo additional testing to comply with these unique requirements, even if their products already met highly internationally inspection processes or international benchmarks. Last, in some cases, it happens that the standards are clear, but the process of demonstrating conformity in terms of testing, inspection, certification is particularly cumbersome or time-consuming or even costly. This is mainly due to the fact that Africa has very few mutual recognition agreements with the Latin American countries for mutual acceptance of testing and certification schemes. In West Africa, on the other hand, the main non-tariff barriers are related to widespread use of roadblocks that cause huge delays to the delivery of goods and frequent requests of informal payments by border agencies. And also, common to the region I described before, there are many complaints about cumbersome custom procedures. To sum up, it's important to know this platform before exporting your product, so you can verify in reference to the type of product you are exporting to the country in Africa that is a destination of your product, what are the most typical non-tariff barriers. Today, thanks to this platform, is it possible? There is also a continental platform that has been developed under the AFCFTA, the African Continental Free Trade Area, and is also a system available online, but at the moment there are very few complaints, about a little bit more than a dozen of complaints, so it's not yet populated. But the regional platforms are very useful for your exporter to understand what are the challenges of exporting to Africa.
Thanks. I think that it's quite very important what you said so far, because even we have high non-tariff barriers. We have like African is doing good because they're making like this process of trade facilitation to create this kind of platform. So the companies were able to get the information as soon on first hand before to close a business, or at least to know what kind of compliance they need to get in order to approach and close on a very good deal with the African market. So I think that it's a balance, no, between the high cost of the non-trade barriers, but at the same time, the process that or the implementation of these platforms that give me this information of how can I make this compliance in the right way. So thanks for this information. Hopefully, if you can share with us the link, the link for the webpage in order to share with our participants, will be great.
Yeah.
Let's continue with our talk, and let's talk about a little bit of regional integration. What are Africa's main regional economic communities, and how do they function? Because I know they're one in an implementation of the FCA, but first we need to know how the regional blocks are working so far.
Yeah. So Africa has a number of regional economic communities that serve as a building block for continental integration, as recognized by the African Union. Each of these community functions to promote economic cooperation and integration among its member states, even though with a varying degree of success and specific focuses. There is an international treaty that was signed in 1991 by the African states, known as Abuja Treaty, that established a pathway for achieving an economic community between African states. And this economic community should be built by leveraging on the current RECs. So these RECs that are the pillars of these economic communities should evolve from the lowest level of economic integration, which is free trade areas, to custom unions, and subsequently to common markets, monetary union, until achieving the status of blocks that are integrated in a single continental one. So there is this progressive path of merging of RECs to achieve a continental community similar to the European Union, because this path was modeled upon the system of the European Union. So the general functioning principle of the regional economic community is the trade liberalization. So their main objective is to reduce and ultimately eliminate tariff and non-tariff barriers among their member states. And they do this also through the harmonization of policies and the regulation. So they work together with their member states to develop common policies, common standards, and common regulation in areas like customs, trade, transport, and even monetary affairs in some cases, because in Africa there are some RECs that have achieved the status of monetary union. So what happened that in the 90s, there was a particular proliferation of these RECs. There were many that were emerging in the different regions of Africa. So the African Union issued in 2006 a decision, it's called the moratorium on the RECs, where they basically said, okay, from now on, we recognize only 8 of these RECs. And these are AMO, which is a REC that includes 5 North African countries, the Maghreb and the Mashrek, so all the Northern African countries. There is ECOWAS in West Africa, which is made up of now 12 countries, because 3 of them recently, beginning of this year, they left ECOWAS to establish the alliance of the Sahelian states, and these are Mali, Burkina Faso, and Niger. There is SADC in the Southern Africa that includes 16 African countries. There is the East African Community, which is a custom union that is currently consolidating a common market. They are starting a liberalization process covering also other factor of production different from goods and services. And it includes I have just, okay, I had an interference maybe in my earphone. So there is IGAD, which is another REC that covers the country of the Horn of Africa. And this REC has not even achieved the status of free trade area, like AMO, like SAD is another officially recognized REC that includes 25 African countries. So in many cases, countries are members of more than one REC. And this creates sometimes conflicting objective and interest, because obviously countries, they play from one REC to another their cards according to the interest the pursuing. If they are more convenient, they leverage the REC that is supporting those interests. So in total, as I said, these RECs are 8, and these are considered the building blocks not only of the CFTA, also the process of achievement of the African continental economic community, because this means that basically the African Union involves only these RECs in this program, and these are the official REC that take part to the activities and projects launched by the African Union. Another aspect that is important, I want to underscore that these RECs have adopted also specific regional master plans. What they do, they join their effort to develop regional infrastructure, to develop roads connecting, or even railways and other form of transport, other networks, to facilitate trade at regional level. So they play also this important role of favoring the integration, the transport integration regionally. And the last aspect, most of these RECs have adopted also protocols on the free movement of persons that are supposed to facilitate the movement of citizens of member states of their country to the entire region. But in this area, progress has been quite disappointing. There are some regs like ECOWAS that have adopted these protocols since the 70s. In case of ECOWAS, the protocol on free movement of person was adopted in 1979, but the progress is still limited because there are still variation in the application, in the type of documents required by police or immigration at borders or with regard to the fees applied for moving from one country to another.
Okay, well, thanks for this insight of regional integration and how the things are moving so far in the African continent. Let's continue because the time is the time is just quite slow. No, it's not slow. It's quite fast so far. We're in the way to finish, but I will get to some interesting issues. Yeah, that you said at the very beginning of the conversation, and we're going to go further. Shipping routes, uh, transport, yeah. From your point of view, what are the main gateways or ports in Africa, and how they are connecting with Latin America?
Okay, so if you look at this slide, you will see the main transport routes, the maritime routes connecting Latin America to Africa and vice versa. If you look at the line in blue, you will see the most of the connection are between Brazil and Argentina with the southern part of the continent, mainly South Africa, and particularly the Durban port, which is one of the main destinations, the port of destination of cargo. So most of the trade between the countries on the Atlantic coast, which include Brazil and Argentina, is carried out through these maritime routes connecting to South Africa, but also to West Africa through the ports of Lomé, for instance, in Togo, or even Lagos in Nigeria, or Tema in Accra, and also with Morocco, the port of Tangier Med, which is the biggest African port, which is a transshipment port. So what happens? Most of this is the reason why the countries in Latin America that trade more with Africa are the ones on the Atlantic side, on the Pacific side, like Colombia, Ecuador, and all the countries that are on the opposite side, on the eastern coast of Latin America. They have a minor trade with Africa, and they use the Panama Canal to move their goods. But what happens? Most of this trade that goes through Europe. This is something really particular because the quantities are very small. So they need to collect additional containers, additional goods, additional cargo in Europe in order to make the trip economically viable. So goods, for instance, that depart from Colombia, they go through the Panama Canal, they go to Europe in ports in Spain like Algeciras, Valencia, or even in Belgium, Antwerp, or even in Italy, Gioia Tauro, or other European port like Rotterdam in the Netherlands. They consolidate other cargo, and after they move back to Africa, and they deliver in the different location. So now Eastern Africa ports, ports like Mombasa, Djibouti, Beira, and all the ports going down up to South Africa, they're served by this kind of vessel to transshipment. So this vessel from Europe, they move to some other ports and they split cargo in other feeder vessel that they deliver these quantities of cargo in the destination market. If you look at this slide, you have a more granular description of the type of trade. If you notice, you see in the high the part of the slide on the right, there is a legend. You see, container is marked in yellow. If you look at the yellow dots, they are very small. This means that there are very few direct connection from Latin America to Africa. As I said, mostly they go through Europe. In some cases, they also go through Asia. They first go to Singapore or Shanghai or Hong Kong. They collect their cargo and they move to Africa for the same reason. There is no economic justification for a full vessel to arrive directly in Africa. They need to collect other goods, other containers to consolidate these goods and deliver a full consignment. If you look at the majority of docks, they are marked, they are in blue, which is a dry bulk cargo. Dry bulk cargo, compared to containerized cargo, has a particularity. It's more complicated to transship because of its own nature. You know, a container is a piece of metal that you can move from a ship to a truck to a railway to a train. So it's easy to transport through different modalities. But in case of bulk goods, there is not this possibility. It's also possible transshipment, but is less used. So most of direct connection, so trips that start in Latin America and they go directly to Africa are dry bulk cargo or tanker transporting petrol oil. Like for instance, you will see in Nigeria, in correspondence of Nigeria, there are quite a lot of pink or dots, which are, no, sorry, red dots that indicates the tanker vessel. So also, let me go to this slide that summarize everything I said because you an overview. If you look, the main connection, the line that is darker in color, is the one going from Brazil, Argentina to North Europe. As I said, this is the most used maritime route because of the problem I indicated, the low quantity of goods. So the Northern Europe ports, they act as a consolidation hubs where the goods originating from Latin America are put together with goods originating from Europe and sent to Africa. But there are also some direct connection, but you see most of them where they are directed in the Cape of Good Hope. So they are connected directly to South Africa. In regional terms, from a regional point of view, the region in Africa that is most connected to Latin American countries is the Southern Africa. And this includes not only the South African ports, but also the Walvis Bay port in Namibia, for instance, where there are quite important shipments of goods from Latin America. There is also the air modality, which is used between Latin America and Africa and vice versa. But, you know, because of the nature of this kind of transport, because airway transport is usually more expensive than maritime, the other modality, is used only for perishable goods, like agricultural goods, or goods that have a short shelf life, like, for instance, products that are they need to be delivered quickly because they may become obsolete if they delivered too late. I give an example: fast fashion products like jeans. Today, there is the fashion that they like these, how they're called, the skinny jeans. They are very tight, but the fashion can change. And if the product is not delivered quickly, the exporter risk that this product, the moment it will arrive on the destination market, is not matching anymore the demand of that market.
That's been quite interesting to see that it's like one challenge that we have in order to improve.
I think you are muted.
Can you hear me? Can you hear me?
Yes, now I think.
Well, thanks for the information because I see that one of the main challenge it's in transport. Like I know that, and that's the idea of the Chamber of Commerce, like to get approach these two markets. But so far, like the challenge is like we have no directly cargo issues between the two continents so far from Argentina and Brazil that are the main players. And as you said, making the south of the continent like the hub of connection, as you saw here in Cape Town, that it will be. But we need to make some connections through maybe the first ports like Miami or other ports in the region in order to get through the different part of the continent. But I think that is an important issue, no? To know
Yeah.
and that the first exporters that want to make business need to know and need to handle what are the main routes that are serving right now, and make these kind of connections. Even we can say that from the Colombian perspective, the last year was opening a cargo route with Ethiopian Airlines. Ethiopian Airlines are making
Yeah.
connection through Bogota to Addis Abeba with some connections, but even like they have to make some connections because there are no direct flights from our regions. But well, that's very quite interesting and insightful information, Danilo. Well, it's making time. It's like just 9 minutes to go. A quick conclusion from your side. What are like the main key issues that um, business people here from Latin America, if they want to do business, what are the main key aspects that you're going to highlight and how they could deal with?
Yeah. So I can give a few recommendations. Number one, the African market is a market that is based on relationships. Okay, so you don't have to be too um, how can say, you need to take your time to build business in Africa. Okay, it's not so quick as people they would expect. You need to build a relation, to be patient, and start with a lighter form of investment. Like for instance, start with a joint venture, find a local partner, and try to join forces with the local partner before trying to develop a brownfield or a greenfield investment with your capital and your own forces. So try to join forces with local partners. Secondly, find a competent logistic provider. You need to find someone that can guide you to navigate the transport procedures, which are complicated, also because of this fragmentation of the frameworks, regulatory framework in Africa. So the regulation on transport you will find in one region are totally different from the regulation in other different regions. Sometimes they differ also from country to countries, but there is some degree of uniformity in each rec. But when you need to trade goods between one rec and another, it becomes really complicated. And in that case, you need the support of someone that is competent and knows the procedures. Also, last recommendation, try to use as much as possible, try to leverage multimodal transport, because the multimodal transport offers the advantage of the efficiencies of combining the different modes of transport where is available, obviously. Don't think only to one segment of the transport, the maritime one or the transport or road transport one. Try to find the optimal solution to combine these different solutions, always with the support of a local logistic expert, because this can lead to significant cost saving. Let me add another one, just to conclude. It's important to understand the local regulation, and in Africa, unfortunately, there are very high delays at border posts. So it is important that all the documentation is in order, and even in this case, you need a good custom clearing agent to support you, because if it is not, that documentation that is not the one that is required by border agents was not aligned to their request, it can create huge delays that can result in increased cost, trade cost, that will compromise the economic profitability of the whole transaction. I would stop here.
Well, thanks very much. And we take note about these recommendations on how the important is like you need to get patience in order like to making business in Africa is going to take time, but we're working on that. Second, to have and a business partnership and a business contact and have a very good provider of logistics is going to be it's going to make the difference in order to make the compliance of these non-trade barriers. They make sure non-trade barrier um, issues and well, in order like to comply with all the things that we need to comply in order to get these markets. So, well, Danilo, thanks very much. It was an insightful presentation. It was very impact information that we have from your side. And well, if anyone wants to contact you, how we can contact you?
My email address, okay, I have several, but the easiest one is desiderio.consultants with the S in the end at gmail.com.
Okay, that's perfect. So if or you can contact the chamber, and I'm going to make the contact with Danilo if you are interested in to get more information or specific data about these compliance issues on transport customs, and we're going to be more than happier to help you. Clav, it's Clav and Desiderio Consultants. We have an MOU. We're working together in order to open these new trade relationships. So yeah, that's the idea. And I want to just only say thank you to you. Thanks for your time to recover this information, and thanks to everyone that was here with us listening this information and that's a one to get approach to the African market. So I will switch to Spanish. Excuse me. Muchísimas gracias a todos los que nos han acompañado en la mañana del día de hoy recibiendo esta información completamente valiosa, temas logísticos, barreras arancelarias, no arancelarias, y cuáles son esos aspectos claves que se deben tener en cuenta al momento de hacer negocios con el continente africano. Damos gracias a Danilo, que se encuentra en Kenia, 4 de la tarde aproximadamente en Kenia, 9 de la mañana ahora en Bogotá. Y los esperamos en una nueva espacio de African Business Latin Hub que será desarrollado a finales del mes de julio con nuevos temas y nuevas oportunidades del continente africano. Muchas gracias. So, thanks very much. So, see you at the next one.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. It was a pleasure. Bye.
Thanks.